welcome to another video. Today we're going to be looking at fly lanes. This is aimed mainly at beginners. I know that fly lanes can be confusing, there's a lot on the market, you don't know which type to use, so we're going to address that today and hopefully give you all the information you need to get you out there and catching fish as soon as possible. Let's go. So first up is your floating fly line. This is a weight forward fly line, which means that the general weight of the line is at the front of the head, which helps you cast, and it carries out the thinner, lighter line behind it, helping you get good presentation and distance. When fishing this, it sits on the surface like so. When you retrieve the line, let's say you're pulling lures, you cast this out. If you start pulling the lure immediately, it'll stay very high in the water column. If you retrieve it with a slower figure of 8 or a pause before you start retrieving, the fly will sink, and as you start retrieving in a slow figure of 8, it would slowly bring the fly to the surface, not actually on the surface, but it would bring the fly up in the column as you retrieve it back, general plane, sort of like this. If you were to cast this out with a heavy beaded lure on and you waited 10-15 seconds, the lure would sink like so, and then when you start retrieving, it will come up in an arc like this until it's fishing on a level plane. It will probably fish just below the surface. Very handy line, something that you have to have, obviously, floating fly line. You also get a double taper fly line, which is primarily used for dry fly fishing to aid presentation. The double taper floating fly line has weight. The belly, as they call it, is in the middle of the line. So basically, when the line lands on the water, there's a very thin running line that lands delicately on the water, where the weight is more in the belly, which helps you cast a little bit, but it gives you a good turnover, and that's called a double taper. My double taper fly lines tend to be quite light, 5 and 6 weight I use for still waters, basically for presenting anything down to 18-20 size shipments, really small dries, which on the day can be a necessity. You do have to have them. If you tend to go for the river fishing, again, a double taper is a better choice, just to basically get that presentation. So the floating fly line is the first fly line that all beginners will come into contact with. It's a must-have. You've got to have a floating fly line, and probably around about 70% of your fly fishing will be done using the floating fly line. Now, when the fly line comes, it normally just comes as the fly line on a large spool, and you have to attach what's called a braided loop, which is what you attach your tippet to, which is your leader which carries your flies. Again, we'll be doing another video showing everything, all the rest of the stuff, the business end, etc., and the flies, as I mentioned in previous videos. So that's the floating fly line, a must have, and as I say, 7 weight is the standard for still waters. You can also go to I do carry an 8 weight with an 8 weight rod, and that's used for when the conditions are quite windy. If there's a wind blowing into my face, I'll switch to the 8 weight line. It gives you that extra bit of line weight to punch a cast into the wind. So the next line from the floating line is what we call an intermediate. Intermediate lines are used for fishing subsurface. Normally I would tend to fish lures on these lines, but you can fish nymphs as well. They're very handy. Anytime that you don't want your fly line to be on the surface, basically this is the go-to line. These intermediate lines are normally clear in colour, or you can actually get some that are camouflage, as they call it. It's kind of a green mono looking colour. I believe you can get them in standard colours as well, blues, etc. Personally, I prefer the clear. It just gives me a little bit of peace of mind for presentation. Again, it is a personal preference. Now this sinks at 2 inches per second. So basically, every 6 seconds, this goes down 1 foot. So if I cast this line out and leave it for 6 seconds, I know that it's gone down 1 foot. Now, when you start retrieving the line, it actually stays at that level, and it does slowly sink depending on the speed of retrieve. But if you're, let's say you're pulling the line with a lure on, you cast this line out, you count to 5, you know you're fishing a foot under the surface, and then you start ripping your lure back. If the fish are feeding at that 1 foot under the surface, the fly is going to be right in the zone, and you're going to have more chance of a fish taking some interest in your fly. Again, the intermediate can be very useful on a blustery, windy day. If you want to present a fly just under the surface, this would be a good line to use. When you're floating lines on the surface, it does get dragged and it affects presentation. So basically this line, I would use this down to about, I normally fish it down to about 4-5 feet, mainly because I don't want to spend a lot of time standing counting down, because obviously the 5 seconds for the foot, and then you have to count down in more increments, so you're basically counting down what, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 seconds to be fishing down at 4-5 feet. It's a lot of time counting and less time fishing, if that makes sense. So basically that's when the next lines that I'm about to show you come into play. But an intermediate, very versatile line, a must have. If I had to say what you do need to go out with as a beginner, I would definitely recommend the floating line and an intermediate. Even if you just ended there, these lines would do you really well, and you wouldn't really need much more. You'd still be catching a lot of fish. Finally, we're on to the big boys, the sinking lines. As a general rule, the sinking lines, the darker the colour, the faster the sink rate. Because I did see a question on social media somewhere, actually not long ago, where somebody had acquired some lines and they weren't exactly sure what they were, as in sink rate, because you get so many different types of sinking lines, like sink rates, that it can be a bit confusing if you're given lines or if you buy lines and there's no markings on them. On these reels, I don't know if you can see it, but I actually mark what I have on there. So just on here, it's scratched on, you may not see it, it's got 7 there, and then on here I've got DI3, which is a die 3. That basically means that this line sinks at 3 inches per second. Slightly faster than the glass, the intermediate there, what I showed you before, but useful. Now, earlier when I was just talking to you about more fishing time, less counting, this is why you would change to these lines. Instead of standing for 30 seconds waiting for these to die 2 to sink, you increase the density of the line that you're using, and obviously it sinks faster, so it's less time to count and it's more time fishing. So this is a die 3. I do have other lines, not at hand. I have die 3s, I use a die 5, and I have a die 7. So as they suggest, they're all different densities and they sink faster. Very useful line, the die 3. I use this quite a lot when fishing a washing line, but basically a basic sink washing line, where I would put a buoyant fab or booby on the point of the flies, with 2 nymphs alongside them further up the droppers. And what basically happens with this is, because I'm fishing subsurface, I could be fishing a foot to 6-7 feet with this, but you can present your flies in a bit of a bow. So your line will come down and your flies will stay up like this, so as you retrieve, you bring them down in an arc, and you can pause and then you can start retrieving again. You get like a little arc motion, which can be very attractive to the fish. Classed as a difficult times line, I would say, just for the sake of you beginners there, these lines are good to target fish that are sitting on the bottom, normally in the heat of summer or even winter, when they're sitting quite dormant and you're wanting to reach those fish. You have to think of it as a table. The fish can be sitting in layers anywhere from the top to the very bottom, and you have to present your fly in the correct zone. If that fish does not want to move at all, which sometimes they don't, they will just sit and wait for food to come to them. They don't like to expel energy, especially in the heat of summer and in the cold of winter when there's very little food around for them. A lot of anglers in the winter will fish lower patterns, which are more suggestive. As in, by suggestive, I don't mean natural. The invoke aggression from the fish, because there's not a lot of food around, and whenever they get an opportunity, they will take it, which is why lures work so well. But if you want to fish deep down, as I say, with these, let's say for the sake of argument, this was the most dense line, the dye 7. It's going to sink pretty rapidly. You can count it down to the bottom, pretty much a foot off the bottom or wherever you want to be, and then when you retrieve at a steady pace, the fly will fish at that level. So your fly could be fishing down to 9-10 feet or even more at times, but it will stay on that level plane. All of the lines that I've discussed all fish at a certain plane that you want them to. So basically the floating line will be on the top, and you can present a fly a little bit deeper using a weighted fly. Intermediate will take any fly down to a level. You can fish with a weighted fly as well, but I was kind of taught to try to avoid using weighted flies on intermediates because it changes the angle of the retrieve of the fly. But again, it's subject to situation, and on days it may be the difference between catching fish and not catching fish. It's all in the movement and the retrieves that you use. So this is the weighted lines. The heavier sinking lines are an extension of the intermediate. As a beginner, I would strongly suggest that you just buy a floating line and an intermediate, to be honest, and that will cover most eventualities, and you'll get to grips with the intermediate line. You'll understand what's happening when you're counting the flies down, the line down, and when you're retrieving. You have to visualize the fish sitting at a certain level. So as a beginner, not a necessity to get a sinking line. These are kind of specialist lines. Floating and intermediate will do you really well. So that's it for this video. The next one that we're going to do is quite a good one. Quite excited about it because I enjoy it. Is actually the business end. We'll briefly go through leader material and onto the fly patterns, what works best, natural imitations, lures, flies for the bung. I'll cover absolutely everything, everything that I know I'm quite happy to share, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. Now, I've noticed that I am approaching 100 subscribers, which to me is a massive deal. To some of the other fly channels, it's a drop in the ocean. They've got immense subscribers, but for me to hit 100 would be absolutely fantastic. So what I'm going to do, when I do actually hit 100 subscribers, I'll put a quick vlog up, a quick video, and we'll get some subject going, and I'll just ask people to comment or in the comment section and give me some ideas. And what I'm going to do is those people who comment, I'm going to put into a little draw, and they're going to get some free flies. I'll post them out absolutely free. Some good winter patterns. It's going to catch a fish. So hopefully hit those 100 subscribers in the next few days. I think I'm sitting at 96 or something, which is really good, and I'm actually feel quite humbled because I only started doing the videos just to occupy myself really, and to share what little I know. I'm not an expert, as I've said, just to share what I know and me fishing adventure, if you like. So it's quite thrilling, and I'm very, very humbled and really grateful. But thanks again. If you haven't already, please subscribe. If there's anything that you would like me to try and cover, or any advice that you have that I could use to help my fishing, please drop a comment in the comments box. But it's fantastic. Stay safe, and thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it.